I knew him from the days of my extreme youth because he made my father's boots, inhabiting with his elder brother two little shops let into one in a small by street now no more but then most fashionably placed in the West End. So here the author is giving the introduction of the Gisela brothers that he knew them right from his youth when his father used to give orders to the Gisela brothers and he used to go with his father, in which their shop was a combination of two little shops which were then made into one and had a board at the top. This was in a fashionably placed west end of the London. That tenement had a certain quiet distinction. There was no sign upon its face that he made for any of the royal family, merely his own German name of Gisela Brothers. So the board that they hung on their shop had no such, you can say, attractive title or something like that. They gave only their own name, Gisela Brothers, as a board hung in the uh, shop. And in the window, a few pair of boots. They did not try to put so many of stuff of the shoes that these are the shoes, these are the shoes. Only a few pair of boots in order to make the people understand that yes, these people make shoes for the customers. I remember that it always troubled me to account for these unwearing boots in the window, for he made only what was ordered, reaching nothing down, and it seemed so inconceivable that what he made could ever have failed to fit. Had he bought them to put there, that too seemed inconceivable. Now, here the author, when he was young, the narrator, he used to wonder that what is it that what convinces the Gisela brothers to put these boots over here. And because they used to make boots only when they were given the orders, they did not make extra boots. Only a few pair of boots were placed on the showcase, and that too it was very incredible for him, for the narrator, to believe that whatever they used to make, whatever boots they used to make, always fitted the customers. Harry bought them to put there. So, what about those shoes which were placed on the showcase? Have they bought them from somewhere in order to put it as a design or as a showpiece on the showcase? That too seemed inconceivable. He would never have tolerated in his house leather on which he had not worked himself. Besides, they were too beautiful, the pair of pumps, so inexpressibly slim, the patent leathers with cloth tops making water come into one's mouth, the tall brown riding boots with marvelous sooty glow, as if though new they had been worn 100 years. Those pairs could have only been made by one who saw before him the sole of boot. So truly were they prototypes incarnating the very spirit of all footgear. Because the type of shoes that were displayed on the showcase has been described here, and even for the narrator, it was inconceivable because these Gisela brothers never compromised with their principles. They could not buy the leather, the boot of any leather made from by any other person. They only appreciated the boots that were made by their own hands and by their own leather. So it was true that maybe these boots were made by the Gisela brothers only. So what type of boots were there? The pair of pumps shoes, and the patent leathers with cloth tops. A cloth type of hood was there on the boots, due to which the people felt greedy that these shoes should be mine. Then tall brown riding boots with marvelous sooty glow. Then there were a tall brown riding boots, and that was having a sooty brown glow, and it seemed as if somebody had worn them 100 years ago. So they was such antique piece of work, as if somebody had read the soul of the boots and had reincarnated them to give them a new life. These thoughts, of course, came to me later, though even when I was promoted to him, at the age of perhaps 14, some inkling haunted me of the dignity of himself and brother. For to make boots, such boots as he made, seemed to me then, and still seems to me, mysterious and wonderful. Now, this narrator, when he was a teenage and he was 14 years of age, then only this thought came to his mind that it is only the Giesler brothers who never compromised with quality had made such type of boots. The dignity, the quality that they had of their own principles had convinced him that these type of boots can be made by them only. And still it was very mysterious for the author, for the narrator to think about it, that they made such wonderful boots. I remember well my shy mark one day while stretching out to him my youthful foot. Isn't it awfully hard to do, Mr. Giesler? So one day when he himself went to his shop in order to get a shoe made for himself, he forwarded his foot before Mr. Giesler so that he could take the measurement of his foot and said, Isn't it hard for you to take the measurement? And his answer, given with a sudden smile from out of the sardonic redness of his beard, it is an art. Mr. Giza just smiled and said, It is an art how to take measurement of any type of foot. Himself he was a little as if made from leather, with his yellow crinkly face and crinkly reddish hair and beard, and neat folds slanting down his cheeks to the corners of his mouth. And his guttural and one-tone voice, for leather is a sardonic substance, and stiff and slow of purpose, and that was a character of his face, save that his eyes, which were grey-blue, and had in them the simple gravity of one secretly possessed by the ideal. His elder brother was so very like him, though watery, paler in every way, with a great industry, that sometimes in early days I was not quite sure of him until the interview was over. Then I knew that it was he, if the words "I will ask my brother" had not been spoken, and that if they had, it was his elder brother. Now, here the author had described the appearance of Mr. Giesler, the main protagonist, the younger brother, that he was a short statured person. He had a yellow, crinkly face, and his eyes were grey blue, and he had neat folds over his cheeks, which ran down towards his lips, and he had reddish brown hair as well as the beard, but he looked as stiff as a leather, because it takes time to mold a leather. Leather is a very stiff piece. You have to work hard on leather in order to mold it and give it a shape. Similar was a characteristic of his face. And he had a guttural voice, you can say heavy voice with one tone. He spoke only in one type of tone. And his elder brother also was very like him. Both of them looked the same. But how could the narrator recognize? Whenever his elder brother would be there, he used to say, I would ask my brother. Brother means I will ask my brother. But if suppose the main protagonist, Mr. Giesler, the younger brother was there, he would never say, I would ask my brother. This way the narrator could recognize both the brothers. When one grew old and wild and ran up bills, one somehow never ran up with Giesler brothers. It would not have seemed becoming to go in there and stretch out one's foot to that blue iron spectacle glance, owing him for more than, say, two pairs, just a comfortable reassurance that one was still his client. Now, whenever a person grows old, that means a person he becomes an adult. Generally, whenever you buy shoes, they are so costly that you run to so many thousands of bills. But whenever you gave an order to Giesler Brothers, the bill would never run to thousands, or you would never feel that the bill has gone so much, because they used to take, you can say, um, simple amount of money, and that too with good quality of shoes. Every time you had to put forward your foot in order to take so that the Giesler brother could take the measurement of your foot, for it was not possible to go to him very often. His boots lasted terribly, and whenever a customer used to give orders to the Giesler brothers and they got their shoes made, They had to go very rarely to the Giza Brothers shop because the boots that they made lasted longer. Some, as it were, essence of boot stitched into them. One went in not as into most shops in the mood of please serve me and let me go, but restfully as one enters a church and sitting on the single wooden chair waited for. There was never anybody there. Soon over the top edge of the sort of well rather dark and smelling soothingly of the leather which formed the shop there would seem his face or that of his elder brother peering down. A guttural sound and the tip tap of bar slippers beating the narrow wooden stairs, and he would stand before one without a coat, a little bent in leather apron, with sleeves turned back, blinking as if awakened from some dream of boots, or like an owl surprised in daylight and annoyed at this interruption. See, this para tells us that the Giesler brothers were so much dedicated to their work that they did not want any type of disturbance or interruption in their work. Now, here the narrator is telling us that whenever he used to go to their shop, he or any other customer, it was not like a normal shop, shoe shop where you go and say that please serve me and let me go, give me, take my order and let me go. You have to wait there patiently, sit on a wooden chair and wait for any one of them to come, because none of them was present in the shop. Both of them were at the top of that shop. Through the wooden stairs, they used to sit in a room where they used to work with a lot of concentration on the boots. So either the younger brother or the elder brother used to peer down that who is there below as a customer. Then with the help of the wooden stairs, they used to descend down, and the sound of the bar slippers used to come as if they are coming down, but with their blinking eyes, as if they have been uh, awakened by their deep sleep or their deep dream, or just like an owl who has been thrown into a bright daylight, as if they were annoyed by the presence of a customer because they were quite busy in their work. And I would say, how do you do, Mr. Giesler? Could you make me a pair of Russia leather boots? And then the author used to, first of all, greet them, ask them how they were, and used to give an order of boots. Without a word, he would leave me, retiring whence he came or into other portion of the shop, and I would continue to rest in the wooden chair, inhaling the incense of his trade. Soon he would come back holding in his thin, veined hand a piece of gold brown leather with eyes fixed on it. He would remark, "What a beautiful piece." When I too had admired it, it would speak again, "When do you want them?" And I would answer, "Oh, as soon as conveniently you can." And he would say, "Tomorrow fortnight." Or if he were his elder brother, I will ask my brother. So when the author would say that, "Would you make me a pair of Russia leather boots?" Then he would, without any word, Mr. Giesler would go to another part of the shop, bring a piece of leather, and that was a gold brown leather, and would say that it is a beautiful piece. And whenever the author or the narrator used to admire it, then he would say, "When do you want them?" And the author would say, "As soon as you can provide me." And he would say that this date you have to come and pick it up. And if it was his elder brother, he would say, "I will ask my brother." Then I would murmur, "Thank you, good morning, Mr. Giesler. Good morning." He would reply, still looking at the leather in his hand. Now, whenever the customer would greet him and leave the shop by saying good morning, good evening, he would greet them, but he would not look at the customer. He would keep on peering or looking constantly at the leather on which he has to work. And as I moved to the door, I would hear the tip tap of his bar slippers restoring him up the stairs to his dream of boots. But if it was some new kind of footgear that he had not yet made me, then indeed he would observe ceremony, divesting me of my boot and holding it long in his hand, looking at it with eyes at once critical and loving, as if recalling the glow with which he had created it and rebuking the way in which one had disorganized his masterpiece. Then, placing my foot on a piece of paper, he would 2 or 3 times tickle the outer edges with a pencil and pass his nervous fingers over my toes, feeling himself into the heart of my requirements. Now, sometimes what happened if the user or the customer would come with another pair of boots on his foot. Immediately, Mr. Giesler was very keen to recognize that it is not the leather with which it has been made, but that means it is not his own made boots. And immediately he would look at it with a critical eyes or with loving eyes or whatever he could feel at that time. And sometimes the boots would be made by him, but the customer who would be wearing it had just worn that shoes out, and then Mr. Giesler would immediately recognize that how the customer had made misuse of that shoes. Then he would take the measurement of the customer, place his foot on a piece of paper, and tickle 2 or 3 times at the places where he could measure how the foot, what was the length of the foot, and what type of shoes the customer would require. I cannot forget that day on which I had occasion to say to him, Mr. Giesler, the last pair of my of town walking boots creaked, you know. He said that one day he had complained, Mr. Giesler, that one of your town walking boots had creaked. He looked at me for a time without replying, as if expecting me to withdraw or qualify the statement, then said, it shouldn't have creaked. It was impossible for Mr. Giesler to digest that complaint, and he immediately started looking at the narrator that maybe he has made some mistake, and then said that it should not have creaked. It did, I am afraid. And then the narrator stressfully said, yes, it had creaked. You got them wet before they found themselves. I don't think so. Now here Mr. Giesler gave a reason that you must have got them wet. That is why they must have creaked. But the narrator said no, they were not wet. At that he lowered his eyes as if hunting for memory of those boots, and I felt sorry I had mentioned this grave thing. Now here Mr. Giesler would look down, thinking on his own that what had he done with that boots? How did he make those boots? Just memorizing so that he may come to know what weakness was there or what mistake he had made while making those boots. Looking at his condition, the narrator would feel sorry that why did he complain it to Mr. Giesler. Send them back, I will look at them. And Mr. Giesler would say that you can send me those boots. I will look at them and try to repair them. A feeling of compassion for my creaking boots surged up in me. So well could I imagine the sorrowful long curiosity of regard which he would bend on them. Some boots, he said slowly, are bad from bird. If I can do nothing with them, I'll take them off your bill. So here a feeling of compassion rose in the heart of the narrator, feeling or you can say, visualizing the scene when Mr. Giza would again sit on those boots, again try to see what was wrong with those boots. Then Mr. Giza said that some boots are, you can say, very bad from birth, and if I can do anything with those boots, I'll try to repair them, and if I'm unable to do, then I'll take them off your bill, means I will give back your money. Once I went absent-mindedly into his shop on a pair of boots bought in an emergency at some large firms. He took my order without showing me any leather, and I could feel his eyes penetrating the inferior integument of my foot. At last he said, those are not my boots. One day the narrator had entered absent-mindedly into his shop to give some order of boots, but that time the narrator was wearing the boots of some other firm which he had bought in emergency. Mr. Giesler took the measurement of his foot. He kept on staring on those boots and last of all said that these are not my boots. The tone was not one of anger nor of sorrow nor even of contempt, but there was in it something quite that froze the blood. He put his hand down and pressed a finger on the place where he left the boot. Endeavoring to be fashionable was not quite comfortable. The tone in which he said was not of anger nor of any complaint, but then he sat down and tried to feel the sole of the boot, and he put his hand on that part of the boot which people would say was comfortable at that place was not comfortable. It was hitting the narrator at that part. It urges you there. Those big worms are no self respect rash. And then, as if something had given way within him, he spoke long and bitterly. It was the only time I ever heard him discuss the conditions and hardships of his trade. So here the Mr. Giza said it hurts you here at this point. And the way, and then he said that these big firms are, you can say, very trash type of things. He said in such a bitter way, and it is for the very first time that the narrator heard how he was speaking about the hardships and the conditions in which they are and what type of hardships they are facing. They get it all, he said. They get it by advertisement, not by work. They take it away from us who love our boots. It goes to this. Presently, I have no work. Every year it gets less, you will see. And looking at his lined face, I saw things I had never noticed before, bitter things and bitter struggle, and what a lot of grey hairs there seemed suddenly in his red beard. Then Mr. Gisela said that all these big firms, they get all the customers towards them. They lure the customers by advertisements. So they have taken away all my customers, and those customers who used to love my boots are now going there. And every time my customers are decreasing in quantity, I have no work presently with me. And for the very first time, the narrator looked again very keenly at his face and found that lot of gray hairs had also grown on his red beard, and what type of deep bitter feelings he had in his heart. As best I could, I explained the circumstances of the purchase of those ill omened boots, but his face and voice made so deep impressions that during the next few minutes I ordered many pairs. Nemesis fell. They lasted more terribly than ever, and I was not able consciously to go to him for nearly 2 years. Now here the narrator tried to explain the circumstances under which he had to buy those boots from the other firm, but the bitterness and the type of struggle Mr. Gisela was facing had deeply rooted into the narrator's heart. And so the narrator had ordered many pairs of boots so that Mr. Gisela gets some money from him. And what happened this time, the boots lasted even longer. They were more better quality of shoes. And for nearly 2 years, then again, the narrator had no time to go there. When at last I went, I was surprised to find that outside one of the two little windows of his shop, another name was painted, also that of a bootmaker, making, of course, for the royal family. The old familiar boots, no longer in dignified isolation, were huddled in the single window. Inside, the now contracted well of one little shop was more scented and darker than ever, and it was longer than usual too before a face peered down and the tip tap of the bar slippers began. At last he stood before me and gazing through those rusty iron spectacles said, Mr. Isn't it? Ah, Mr. Gisla, I stammered, but your boots are really too good, you know. See, these are quite decent still. And I stretched out to him my foot. He looked at it. Yes, people do not want good boots, it seems. Now, after 2 years, when the narrator reached to his shop, he found that one of the shops had been taken away by somebody because the other board was hanging on the other shop. And one of the shops of Mr. Giesler didn't have those boots now that used to be placed in the showcase. And when he went inside, it was even more darker, that single room of the shop, and the smell was even more stronger of the leather. When he heard the bar slippers of Mr. Gisela when he descended downstairs, and then Mr. Gisela grew much older in age, and he looked through his iron spectacles and said, Acha, Mr. Isn't it? And then the narrator said, Yes. Now these shoes last so good. You can look at them. Then Mr. Gisler looked at his shoes and said, Yes, but people do not require good boots, it seems so. To get away from his reproachable eyes and voice, I hastily remarked, What have you done to your shop? Now, The author was quite afraid of his eyes, and so he changed the topic and said, "What has happened to your shop now?" He answered quietly, "It was too expensive. Do you want some boots?" He said that it was too expensive to pay the rent for it. And then he came to the point, Mr. Gisler, and said, "Do you want some boots?" I ordered 3 pairs, though I had only wanted two, and quickly left. I do not know quite a feeling of being part in his mind of a conspiracy against him or not, perhaps so much against him as against his idea of boot. One does not, I suppose, care to feel like that, for it was again many months before my next visit to his shop paid. I remember with the feeling, oh well, I can't leave the old boy, so here goes. Perhaps it'll be his elder brother. Now, here the narrator wanted to order 2 pairs of boots, but he ordered 3 pairs. He didn't know why. Maybe a feeling of compassion was there in his heart for him, that he wanted him to earn more money. And so he left the shop hurriedly. But for a few months, he didn't again visit the shop. After a few months, he again tried to visit the shop and thought that maybe his elder brother would be there. For his elder brother, I knew, had no character enough to reproach me even dumbly. And to my relief, in the shop there did appear to be his elder brother handling a piece of leather. "Well, Mr. Giza," I said, "how are you?" He came close and peered at me. "I am pretty well, but my elder brother is dead." Now he thought that he was expecting that elder brother would be there. But what happened is, when he reached the shop and said that, "How are you, Mr. Giesler?" It was actually the younger brother, and he said that, "I am quite well,